Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm going to talk about, well, but simplifying business processes using AI and no-code. Hope to inspire you with some ideas how you can approach simplifying your business process and give you a very practical use case today. So the first thing that you can expect is why simplicity is key to improving your business process. So I'll give you some pointers on how you can approach simplifying processes. Then I'll go into a little bit of more detail on AI, some of the downsides and upsides of it, and how you can use it together with no-code in a powerful combination. And then the third thing that I'll show you is that specific use case, using AI and no-code in a process in a way that actually many businesses could use today. A little bit about myself. My name is Jesse. In Dutch we say Jesse, but I also listen to Jesse. My last name is Myers, as in Mike Myers, if you know him. That's my last name, except spelled differently. I have an MSc in software engineering, in software architecture actually. I'm the founder of Triggre, which is a no-code platform. Not going to talk about that today. And apart from Triggre, I've also founded 2 other SaaS companies before. I started when I was 19 in university because it was just more fun than working at the supermarket, honestly. That was how it got started. Yeah, and that's where we are today. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about simplicity. And it was, I think, like 10 years ago, I met up with my professor, who I did my thesis with, and she handed me this book about simplicity, and she says, "Jesse, this book is very good about the simplicity." And she's Italian, so she actually speaks like that. And it was called The 10 Laws of Simplicity by John Maeda, who used to be a professor at MIT. And we've used that book for many of the things that we do at Triggre with our platform, but also with the processes that we automate, that we sort of advocate. I'm going to go through the 10 laws and give you some examples, not specifically maybe from business processes, but just to give you an idea, like how can you tackle simplifying processes? Which sort of angles can you take? As we're going to get started. I did not click that one. Okay, so the first law is reduce, so to sort of thoughtfully reduce complexity. I'll quickly overview them and then we'll go into some more detail. The second law is organizing the process or the data or the steps in a thoughtful way. Reducing time in processes can feel like simplicity. Knowledge or learning about things will often increase simplicity. I have a really good example with this one, by the way, so look out for that one. The fifth, I can't read it here, but it's differences, and it basically states that complexity and simplicity, they need each other, right? There needs to be some contrast there. Then we go to context, which has a difficult saying, but basically what it means is anything that you simplify, you focus on it, right? And you need to not forget about the context that surrounds it. Then we'll talk a little bit about law 7, emotion. How emotions are very important in simplifying these processes. We'll go through trust, how we trust in simple processes. This is a very interesting one. And then failure. Some processes or some things can just never be made simple. Also very important to know. And then it wouldn't be a simplicity law set if the last one wasn't sort of a Sauron of simplicity laws to sort of bind it all together into one simple law, the one. So sort of if any of the others don't work, think about this one and you'll probably get a good A. So we're going to get started with the first one. The simplest way to achieve simplicity is through thoughtful reduction. And basically what you want to do, the idea behind it, is to sort of take small steps and think about which items can I reduce or remove. And a really good example, I'm Dutch, so obviously I'm going to come up with a Dutch painter. But does anyone know who this painting, who made this painting? I'm going to get at least one guess from you. Very close, but no. That's what I thought as well, but no. Not Van Gogh, but it is indeed Van Gogh style, right? Okay, very good. So that's correct. No, this is actually Mondrian. And obviously, Mondrian has been known for very different types of paintings. But Mondrian started out painting trees and sheds, actually. But I take this one because he started with this and he wanted to make it more simple, so he took a step to simplify it. And he took another step to simplify it. And yet another, and then you start seeing more of his later work in this. And finally, and this is a picture that I made in the Dutch, in the museum in The Hague, which I highly recommend you go to. He ended up with his famous color sets. And this is from the Victory Boogie Woogie, where he actually also removed even the black lines from it. So that sort of step-by-step process is what got him here. There's no way you're going to go from the first image to this one in one step. It's just not going to happen, right? So that's a thoughtful reduction. It's a really good way to approach some of the business processes. Law 2 about organizing. Organization makes a system of many appear fewer. Now, this is not a picture of my desk, but it could be. Usually we have some stacks of paper and everything, and it's like a little bit of a mess. But if you take the same amount of information that is presented in a sort of a messy way, for example, like maybe you have like a large list of items or something like that, right? And you add some categorization to it, for example, or in this case, you just stack it up neatly and you add some stickers maybe, or some chapters. It feels simpler because you can navigate it faster. That's the second law about organization. And then time. Savings in time feel like simplicity, right? So if something takes less time, then it feels more simple. Even if maybe it isn't sort of in the background, it does feel like that. And one thing that I personally really detest is traffic jams. I tend to actually go to the office outside of rush hour. And the thing is that we're just like, you're just driving a little bit and waiting and stopping and waiting, where sometimes if you just find a different route, right, one that goes a little bit around it, but it's faster, it might be longer, but it feels simpler if it's easier going. So that is a time saver that will feel more simple. This is very true for processes. If you come across any application that loads information, right, the shorter it takes, the simpler it feels. It doesn't necessarily have to be true, but it does feel like it's a simpler way to do it. So that's a very big one. And then the learn one. Now I promised you a good example. Knowledge makes everything simpler. So I'm going to ask for some hands here. Who knows how to use this? I mean, I do. But if you have a toddler at home, do they know how to use it? You think they do? Yeah, but would they rotate it the right way? No, right? They would maybe go the wrong way. So that's a piece of knowledge that I agree, it's a very simple tool, but you have to know that you have to turn it right. Now the English have a really nice mnemonic or like a memory thing for that, where they say righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So that's very easy to remember if you're English speaking. But it is knowledge that makes the tool simple, right? So the more you know, the simpler something can come across to you. Very important. So don't forget that educational part of your processes. And then the simplicity and complexity that need each other, the difference between the two. This is a part of a cover of a book, and arguably this is a pretty complex shape. But if you see where it comes from, it suddenly seems simple, right? So what often happens is if we simplify something and that becomes the standard, it's no longer simple, right? You need to have that contrast. You need to know where you started with the complex system, make it simple. For example, the internet search engines are a good example. They're very complex systems. It used to be extremely complex. When we first had internet, we had this little booklet that you had to find the website that you were looking for, and you had to type it in. That was literally how you found a website with CompuServe back in the day, in the Netherlands at least. And now you just type it in Google and it works. And that's now so standard that it doesn't feel simple anymore. But back when Google came out, when Alta Vista was around, it was like magic. So simple. So that's an interesting one to remember, that they need each other. The next one is a little bit hard to describe the context. So the law says what lies in the periphery of simplicity is definitely not peripheral. It's a very eloquent way to say that if you focus on something that is very simple, right, that you should not forget the things that are around it, because they might not be unimportant, so to say. So an example of this, I took some screenshots from our own platform. I'm going to try to not stand in the way so you can see it well. This is a data model designer. We simplified it as much as we can, and imagine that you're sort of working on this block. But there's something very important going on because something is wrong in your design. So we made this little red dot. So if I would click that, because it's red, it stands out, right? So it's a thing that's in the periphery, but it's not peripheral. That's the thing. It's not unimportant. If I would click it, I would see that there's probably something going on here, right? And this is how we try to sort of shift the focus. We keep it simple, but we also want to make sure that we inform users of things that are important. And you end up at this process, which is not done yet, so we can't make software from this. That's sort of an example of how this, there can be very important things around your simple process or around your simple interface that you want to draw attention to. And shifting the focus from the right thing at the right time is a very important aspect to making things feel simple. Then emotions. More emotions are better than fewer positive emotions, probably. But this is very interesting as well. If you think about why we automate things, we tend to automate things nowadays to have people have more time to work on the things that matter more, that humans can only do, right? That's an emotional thing right there. And one of my favorite, I'm going to call it designer, he's an architect, favorite architect, he starts his whole process with this notion, and that's Norman Foster. I'm not sure if you know this building. I'm not sure if it's still Swiss Re headquarters in London. Yeah, is it? Okay. It's called the Gherkin or the cigar because it looks like a cigar. But there's this documentary about Norman Foster where he explains how he starts with the emotion before even designing the building. He starts with, how do I want people to feel when they walk into my building, right? And I think that this is also very important for your business process. Like, how do you want people to feel that interact with them? This is an important thing. I get very frustrated if things don't work or if I have to plow through some things. And that is a very negative emotion. Whereas if it runs smoothly, even if I have to click one time more or something, but if it runs smoothly and I know what to do, that is very simple to me. And I think that to show how Norman Foster has a really good eye for this, to how far you can stretch this, this is the Reichstag in Berlin, which he did a huge renovation on. This is the dome that's on top. And he really took into account the dark history of it, but also the new state that it got. So transparency, but also leaving intact, for example, the Russian graffiti that's on the wall, because it's part of the history. So really acknowledging which emotions and things make the Reichstag what it is, and then building around that. And this is something that for business processes also you have these things in companies. You have the the culture, you have the emotions that belong with that culture, that are expressed in the DNA of a business. These things you can take into account when you design business processes. It's just a different way of looking at them. In simplicity, we trust, the trust part of it. When my business partner, Mark, he couldn't be here because he just got baby twins. Yeah, our condolences, right? It's hard on him right now, I can tell you. Bar this talk, if he calls, I drop everything. Because that's his 10-minute window during the day where he actually has some energy right now, except for the babies. But when we go and have dinner, when I see a menu like this, I know that it's going to be a very, very, very long evening. Because it takes us 3 hours to select something. It's so hard. We found a life hack, by the way, so I'm going to give you this. Always go for the chef's menu. It's always good. But if you make a simpler menu, shorter, it feels simpler, right? So this, I trust the food on this list more, weirdly, than the other list. Because it's simpler, it's shorter, and somehow there's more trust in what they will make for me. So that simplicity really gives an air of trust, which is really important if you design a process or you design any tool. Very important to acknowledge that. And some things can never be made simple, and I have to admit, I took a screenshot again of one of our applications that we internally use, which is a very complicated process, yes. Using it, you wouldn't see it, but the process itself is just complicated, and I cannot get around that. The only thing I can do is acknowledge that and try to abstract away as much as I can, right? So the same goes for search engines. Again, like the technology in the back, the network that they have, the parsing that they have to do, the immense amount of data, also with AI systems nowadays, it is just very complex. There's no getting around that. So important aspect to remember that some things just are complex, and that's okay. And finally, as I said, the Sauron of the laws to bind everything together. If sort of you think about it holistically, simplicity is about subtracting the obvious and adding the meaningful, right? So things that are obvious, automate them. If you can decide something automatically, decide it automatically. If it's correct in 90% of the cases, automate it in 90% of the cases. Have that 10% where you need a human to decide something and take that away from it, right? That is simplicity. That is a meaningful addition to a process. So that is how you can approach simplicity in any different field, but also in business processes. And then when you look at how you can apply AI and NoCode together, we have to talk about a little bit about hard skills and soft skills, because many people find it hard to understand how can I actually apply AI to a business process. And the way I see it is, this person is looking down, by the way, because their left brain on the far side, that's your logic side, right? So the logical piece of your brain, the way that we think, the way that we determine processes and everything, that is our left side, and the right side is our soft skills, our creativity, our emotions and things. But these two halves, they don't operate independently of each other. They work together. And the same thing goes for NoCode and AI. And you have to sort of see that NoCode can be linked to that logic sense of things. So you can view NoCode as the deterministic process that you can build. But that's only half of the brain, right? It's the deterministic things, it's the hard logic that you can build. But then if you view AI as sort of the more soft skills part of the whole deal, that is sort of the idea that I want to give you. And I'll give you a very clear example of this, but that's the difference that I see in these two technologies and how you can actually start using them together. Because On their own, they're very powerful. They're nice, but together they're even more interesting. And if you look at AI nowadays, we're talking mostly about generative AI. And I wanted to discuss a couple of the problems that we have and how to circumvent them, because I think that that is a big deal in how you actually apply AI to your business process, but to any process. So I made this image, and yes, this is Van Gogh, but not the real Van Gogh. This is, I was like, whoa, what can I do that is very Dutch to promote where I'm from? Paint Amsterdam in the style of Van Gogh's Starry Night by Stable Diffusion. That's this. And then I was like, oh, but this is a little bit small for my presentation, so I need to add something. Luckily, Photoshop has a generative fill. So yeah, I see someone go like, oh, you use generative fill. Yeah, I did. So I completed it. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It's kind of weird that like the dog turns into a boat. I don't know. I've never seen that in real life, but you know, at first glance, it looks okay. It looks okay. So the problem with that is that there's a certain bias to it, right? Boats and canals and docks and everything. And on Reddit, there's this really fun forum where a couple of months ago, someone asked, I think it was Midjourney, to draw female warriors from Greece, female warrior from Japan, female warrior from New Zealand. Now, there's quite some bias in here already, because all of them have high cheekbones, they have large eyes, they have full lips, they have perfect teeth. If you see them, in this one it's not, but so there's already some bias. But the funniest one was USA. Yeah, there's quite some bias in this one. Probably not intended. But circumventing such bias is very important, as Amazon showed in 2008 already, I think this was. They made a recruitment tool. And the recruitment tool was supposed to help them filter out through like all the CVs that they got from people to pick out the ones that were most likely to fit their company. So they built this AI tool. They said, like, here's all the CVs of the people that were hired, and train yourself, and then we'll, you know, be able to select those that are good. But the problem with that is the way that generative AI works, and that I'll come back to that later. But what it does is basically these AIs, they apply their bias, mostly the generative side, because you take a really tiny prompt, and it's just, if you really look down to sort of how it is built, it's all probabilities, right? It's probabilities of what would probably be the right answer, and then you generate a huge answer, a huge extrapolated result that is full of these probabilities, which is good because it's a pretty good answer. I mean, if you've used GPT, it provides you with very interesting and good content if you prompt it right. But if we look back at this image, you could have said like, oh, but this is the one answer that you have. But actually, this one was also a correct answer. And this one was also a correct answer. So it's hard to determine which one is the best answer, because there's not one answer. And this is very hard when you work with business processes, because you want to be able to make it a deterministic process. So in order to do that, and we'll apply this to the Amazon case in a moment, is that you turn it around. Because the fun thing about generative AI is that it's actually very good at categorization. Right? So you use a bigger prompt, and you ask that bigger prompt to give you a smaller result. So, for example, a case that I've once shown is to really make it soft skills is what is the tone of voice of a certain article, for example. Or in case of a CV, you can ask something about, maybe it can score something about proactiveness from a CV. This makes it from a CV, from a large prompt, into a small prompt, a small score that you can then work with. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how we can improve that case that Amazon actually stopped using their AI, and how you could use publicly available tools like GPT to actually improve on that process, because they were onto something with it. It's a good process. It adheres to many of the rules that we just saw in the laws, right? It reduces time, because this was the manual process. I'm hoping that everyone can see. But the manual process, if you've ever searched for someone, it's like you search for some candidates, you get some CVs, right? You plow through them, you select some of the people to interview, and finally you select the one or multiple people that you'd like to have if you're so lucky to get enough candidates these days. So their idea was good, to say like, hey, look, the search probably with external companies and with a website that sort of reaches out, that works. Then we want to have an AI that selects the CVs that match our standards, so that we can only do the interview. So the idea was good, right? It reduces time, it reduces complexity, it does all these things that really make it simple. There's just one problem with it, because that AI judges it, is it was fed with the information from Amazon, and they happen to be mostly men in technical jobs. So what happens is, if you feed it with only the people that work already at Amazon, right, it starts thinking that, oh, probably we need only men. It's not true, but that's the probability nature of these processes. So they try to do a lot of things, like they try to remove references to being female from it. It didn't work because there's all-female colleges, for example. Well, none of the men went to an all-female college, so if you went to an all-female college, that must be bad, right? So this was very hard for them to get that bias out of it, because they only based it on their own results, and they obviously cannot do it on every CV out there, because that's not the subset that they want. This bias is in there. So if we want to remove that, we're going to use that idea of having AIs categorize things for us, the soft skills of determining some things. The point here is, what we can do is we can ask an AI to score a candidate on a certain specific skill or a competence, right? And then we can say, like, my example is like a score from 0 to 5. Score someone on this skill from 0 to 5. And then you do that for a number of skills. So the idea there, how you combine it, is you take the CV, you score the CV on the desired competencies. Now, these competencies obviously come from your business, right? They're unique to your business. So you determine which bias you want. Is creativity important? For example, critical thinking, logical thinking? These things, they even differ per role. But this is the exact thing that you can actually take from that, and you can ask this AI to score the CV based on these things, right? And then you can use all these results, you can feed them into your NoCode tool, into your process, and you can have a final score. For example, I made an example process that you could use. You get the score for each skill. You can just ask GPT for something like this. This is fairly simple. I think that everyone who's ever written a prompt can get this in like 10 minutes. And you multiply each skill score by a weight. For example, maybe in some roles, certain skills, certain competencies are more important, so you can differ the weight, right? That makes sense. And then you sum the scores and you can determine a result. And if someone goes over a certain threshold, you invite them. If they don't, that's the simplest version you can make. Then you decline this CV. The added advantage of this is that you can explain to this person why they were selected or why they were not selected, which I think in using AI is a very important aspect. You have to be able to tell people, why did this AI judge you as being not creative enough or not this enough? Like, just saying like, oh yeah, we decided not to select you. Why? Oh, I don't know, AI said so. It's not really what you want. So that's an added advantage of this process, and this is something that you can very easily build already nowadays. Yeah, so that's basically how we and some of our customers already have used this. For example, for incoming emails, to automatically source them to the right department, whether you need to handle them at all, whether you can automatically answer them. You can think of all these like different categorizations that you can make in different processes that deal with unstructured data. And by just thoughtfully reducing it step by step into components that actually make sense for the business and that can be explained in a way that the process adheres to the culture of the company and the business goals, you can use AI and artificial intelligence together in a way today that I really feel helps. So that's it. I have time for questions if you want. Go ahead. Yes.
What is the company's name?
Triggre with RE. Yes, that's the company. Yeah.
Triggre in Dutch?
No, it's similar indeed to the character from Winnie the Pooh, but not named after it. But it's called Triggre, like the trigger with but just with re.com. Yeah. It's a platform that focuses mostly on business processes, as you might have guessed. That's where my business partner and I come from, sort of in the background, our history, and mostly complex logic, integration with any web API that you can find, and basically B2B portals such as customer and supplier portals. That's what we do. We have some people in red. Eduardo's over there, Hannah's over here, and Rose is over here. So if you spot some red shirts, you can ask them a lot after. Anyone else? Yes. Yeah. That's a pretty philosophical question. In case that it didn't get picked up, the question is like I talked a lot about indeed like filling process with simplicity, about the simplicity, and whether it's just a feeling of simplicity versus making things actually simpler in terms of maybe a more mathematical approach to simplicity, for example. And I would argue at some point that there is a place for mathematically making things simple. But when it comes to people working with the system, the feeling of simplicity is very much what you need. So if it's a completely automated system, for example, in our platform, we validate designs. That is a thing that makes it simple to the user. And making that code as simple as possible is indeed a very technical approach to simplicity. So yes, that is extremely important, but that's because there's no humans involved in that part. When it comes to humans, I would say that if something is mathematically simple, but it doesn't feel simple, then it doesn't really reach its goal. So yeah, preferably they go hand in hand though. Yeah. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Thanks. I think, yes, automating simple tasks is very important. However, I feel that that is often a short-term solution, perhaps. So what we focused on when we built our platform, at least, is the bigger processes that are usually more complex to build, right? With the let's say with coding or with local platforms, making that process simple is what we sort of aimed for. And to give you an example, and many of you might recognize this, but there's still a lot that's been done with Excel sheets and calculations. So we have a customer who they send shipments, large shipments, many pallets, and they have, I think, about 40 carriers that they use. That's a lot. And all these carriers, one is in euros, the other you pay them in dollars. Then this one has a different weight distribution that they base their pricing on. So it's very hard to determine or guess which one's cheapest, right? This is a very core process for them, but automating it is very expensive. So they simplified it by making that process automated, where only certain ones that need extra help from humans are sort of put into the exception list of the process. So I would say that automating a process like that is extremely valuable. As an example. But I think that, yes, both these small tasks can be valuable because they save time, but then use that time to automate some of the bigger things that are available. That's what I would do, at least. Like, win time and then use that to further automate. Oh, yep, sorry. I saw something move. I was like, yeah. 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 Yeah, so the question is, how do you sort of, after you've automated the process, how do you then visualize it? And in this case, again, I said that I think that part where you allow to see the results and what they're based on is something that's not your main process, right? So I would visualize these things, for example, a list of candidates, that's the output for the human, in this case, that you want to have. So I would ask the CVs to be uploaded by maybe the companies that I would hire to find people for me, and out comes some people that I want to interview. If I find that's too few people, I can look at the results of others and maybe decide to pick them up. So, but that's a human decision, so I would make it that the main process would end in a screen which shows me those candidates, and maybe you can further automate it from there, like maybe support that workflow, but then have an option to dig into the results deeper. Perhaps also show charts with like how many did we get in and how many got selected. What's the distribution of skills that we got? Those things you could then do. But it does start with the automation of the process, and then you can add visualization like that would give you more insight, I think. Yeah. Okay. I saw a hand here somewhere. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about the integration of no-code into that process, because I see a lot what you said about the whole artificial intelligence can make things simpler,
Mm-hmm.
but I struggle to see at what point do the no-code intervene.
Okay, yeah. So the question is, can you explain a little bit more how the integration with the no-code and the AI goes? So in our case, what we do is basically in the process that we have, you would get a CV uploaded, right? I would call, for example, in our platform, that's the one that I know best, but I would call an OCR function, for example, to get the text out of it. That's step one. I get the text back. Good. I can work with the text. That's step two in my process. This is all in the no-code platform. Then I would send it to GPT with a specific prompt to get me a score on one skill, then the next, and the next, and the next. I would store all these skills in my data model, in my no-code platform, and I would apply the weight. I would say like, oh, this is a role for a technician, or this is a role for customer service. So this has different weights to the different competencies and skills. I would multiply that in my no-code tool. That gives me an end score. You can also apply different algorithms, obviously. This is one that's easy to explain. And then the end score, I would check if that meets the threshold that we want for that. If yes, I put it into the list, as you suggested, the list of yes, these people can go. If not, I would give it a status that says, okay, this is declined, maybe automate some nice emails and stuff after that. That would be sort of how I visualize how that works together.
Do you visualize like the no-code platform like having tools to connect easily to the artificial intelligence? Because I struggle to see like what would I earn by not coding all those calculus
Yeah.
going through the no-code platform.
Yeah. So I think that what you get from that, instead of, so the question is, why should I use a no-code platform and not code it? Is for these types of processes, they're more adjustable when you use no-code. But mainly, I feel that if you're a programmer, that you would work on different problems that require more programming skills and that cannot be solved with no code. There are many of these around, and I feel that because I'm a programmer by heart too, so I feel that I want to work on sort of not only the workflow solutions, but really on like some more deep tech solutions, because that's where we really miss some expertise here. And the other thing that you get is just really quick adjustability. Nothing is as changeable as these type of processes in businesses. So by the time that you're done, even with the no-code platform, by the time that you're done, requirements have already changed again. And having that adaptability and that tweakability quickly, especially in these front-facing processes, is very important. I think that we're out of time, except for one more question, if there's one. Yes? Well, for us, very few, because we are very honest about it up front. So, for example, what we're not good at is we are not a pixel perfect marketing type website like Webflow, where you can design everything pixel perfectly. We don't do that. We go for speed and for business to business, which means that is something that if we get a sense of that, we're like, well, that is not okay. So, so that doesn't happen that often, to be honest, because we select beforehand in sales calls. We actually do that. Yeah, there's no tool that's good for everything, and in this case, we really focus on: is it a complex business process? Is it B2B? Or if it is B2C, we have a couple of customers who are that. Are they okay with the limitations that we have? And I feel that that is something that you have to be very honest and upfront about in any case. Okay, I'll just squeeze that one in. Sorry. Yeah, you can connect it with Salesforce for sure. Yeah. Okay, I think that that's all the time I have. I don't want to take away from your lunch. Thank you so much.